Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business forum presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce, bringing timely economic discussion to the region for nearly 40 years. Thank you to our sponsors and partners. Presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. Cooperating sponsor, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, Key Bank, and Viral. Community Corner sponsor, Goral Palmer. Tomorrow's leaders and entrepreneurs sponsors, AAA Northern New England and ProSearch. Coffee sponsor, Skowhegan Savings. Parking sponsor, Vitalius Real Estate Group. Media partners, radio sponsor, WGAN. Print sponsor, The Forecaster. TV sponsor, WMTW Maine CW. Business news sponsor, Maine Biz, with production support provided by Headlight. And thank you to our special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, MEMIC, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, Southern Maine Community College, and the University of Southern Maine. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber President, Brit Vitalius.
Good morning, and welcome to September Eggs and Issues program, the monthly business breakfast event series of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. This is our first Eggs of the 2021-22 Chamber season, and this is our first Eggs in person since March 11th, 2020. Thank you for being here. It is so great to see everyone in person. I'm sorry that you had to get up this morning and actually get dressed and put on pants, but I'm really glad you're here. My name is Brit Vitalius. I own a real estate brokerage here in Portland called Vitalius Real Estate Group, and I'm honored to serve as the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Now, I'm going to be here for a couple years. This is my first meeting. I think became president a couple weeks ago, so we're going to be doing this for a while. I want you to know I'm not a morning person. So that was the hardest part of accepting this role, but I'm going to do my best. Quincy assured me that, if I had a tough night the night before, she could fill in, but I will do my best to be here every month, and I'm really excited. Today's presentation is a timely one. We're going to be discussing Maine's labor shortage. But before we get into today's presentation and thank you of our sponsors, I just want to put out a couple other thank yous. First, to my predecessor, Jim Cohen, who has just done an incredible job over the last 2 years. When he started in this position, he thought he would be up here with all of you in person for 2 years doing Eggs and Issues. And instead, after 6 months, he wound up doing the rest of the time from home, maybe from his condo at Sugarloaf occasionally, hosting Eggs and Issues. And that is not an easy job. To be talking into a laptop to 300, 400, 500 people, interviewing the governor, and hoping there are people on the other side listening and being there and being engaged. And his leadership, his experience, and professionalism really got us through this, and I think was one of the reasons that Eggs and Issues stayed so strong throughout all this. Second, I want to publicly recognize the charm, the grace, and the perseverance of the Portland Regional Chamber staff through all of this. When the pandemic shut us all down, the Chamber board braced for a major contraction in our membership and actually reduced the hours and pay of the Chamber staff. But I don't think they worked less. I think they worked harder. And the Chamber became stronger through all of this. In times of need, when we need to come together to support each other, the Chamber was there and has just done an incredible job to be there for the business community and keep events like this at Eggs and Issues strong. So with Quincy and her leadership and the staff, I want to just take a moment to thank all of the Chamber. Thank you. So now we're to the portion of the program where we thank our generous sponsors of Eggs and Issues who make this event possible, whether in person or virtual. First and foremost, our presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. I also want to thank our other generous sponsors, our cooperating sponsor, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, Key Bank, and Viral, community corner sponsor, Goral Palmer, and today's Community Corner featured member is Live and Work in Maine. Established in 2018, Live and Work in Maine is a not-for-profit initiative designed to increase awareness about the great career opportunities that exist in Maine and promote the world-class quality of life that us Mainers enjoy. Their mission is to show the world that in Maine you can have it all when it comes to quality of life and quality of career. We are fortunate to be joined by members of Live and Work in Maine, staff and board of directors. And if you are with us today, please stand and be recognized. The Chamber is fortunate to have such a wonderful working relationship with Live and Work in Maine. We're grateful for all that you do to help us attract talent to our great state, a mission which is so apropos and ties into today's conversation. Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs sponsor is AAA Northern New England and our newest sponsor, ProSearch. Established in 1994, ProSearch is Maine's premier staffing and recruiting firm, recruiting talent locally and nationally for Maine's employers. Another apropos sponsor here. Since 2017, they are 100% employee-owned. Through our Tomorrow's Leaders program, the Chamber is able to invite students in the region, high school and college students, to attend Exit Issues complimentarily, for free. With us today are students from Gorham High School, Portland High School, and USM. I do think of the majority of students today may be joining us remotely, but if you are here in person, please stand and be recognized. Our coffee sponsor is Skowhegan Savings Bank. Our parking sponsor, Vitalius Real Estate Group. And a special thank you to our media partners, The Forecaster, WGAN, WMTW Maine CW, and Maine Biz. Our FMI, that's For More Information sponsor, is a Portland Public Library. And production support, both on-site and the virtual broadcast, is provided by Headlight Audiovisual. And a thanks to Holiday Inn by the Bay. We are so happy to be back in person safely once again. And a very special thank you to our special community partners who support all of our Chamber initiatives. Anthem, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, University of Southern Maine Community College, and MEMIC. Let's have a round of applause for all of our generous sponsors. Before we begin today's program, I do want to make a special note of several items related to our work at the Portland Community Chamber. Now, first, it's a reminder that in November, Portland will have their annual municipal elections, including 3 open city council seats and 3 school board seats. We cannot stress enough the importance of getting involved in these municipal elections that will drive policy in Portland for years to come. If you want to learn more about the candidates and the issues, please reach out to our advocacy staff who can talk to you about ways to be involved through donating, volunteering, and voting. Additionally, I would be remiss if not to mention Portland's ongoing Charter Commission process. The outcomes from this commission will determine Portland's form of municipal government for decades to come. So I call on all of our members to engage with the process, understand the issues before the commission, and make your voices heard as the commissioners study what Portland's leadership should look like. Now on today's presentation, labor shortage. In today's presentation, you're going to hear about topics ranging from the investment in Maine's workforce through Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, hurdles to workforce development posed by affordable housing, and other barriers and ongoing challenges posed to our state's workforce development initiatives by the global pandemic. As a reminder, like all Exit Issues programs, we'll be recording the event today, which will be available at the Chamber's YouTube channel. We're also streaming the program live for those of us who are joining remotely. If you have any additional questions following today's program, you're welcome to send them to the Chamber at chamber@portlandregion.com. Now, at this time, I would like to introduce our panelists for today's program. Commissioner Fortman and Matt Lewis, why don't you come on up? Laura Fortman serves as a commissioner for the Maine Department of Labor. She is responsible for labor standards enforcement, employment and training programs, unemployment insurance, labor market information, and vocational rehabilitation services. Commissioner Fortman brings more than 20 years of public policy and advocacy experience to the Department of Labor, which he also led under Governor Baldacci from 2003 to 2011. Commissioner Fortman also served as Deputy Administrator for the Wage and Hour Division at the U.S. Department of Labor from 2013 to 2017. Welcome, Commissioner Fortman. And Matt Lewis serves as president of Hospitality Maine, which is the state's only nonprofit trade group representing hotels and restaurants. Matt took this role in February after relocating to Maine from California. He's a former executive director of Visit Richmond, CA, and ran global sales for Nico Hotels in San Francisco. Thank you for joining us today, Matt. So let's start today's discussion with a short presentation from Commissioner Fortman.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you so much. Yeah, that's a good question. I know I'm not sitting because this was obviously designed with the moderator in mind. I think I can speak for Matt here. Both of us have short legs, so I figure I have to stand or I'll fall off the chair. So this is wonderful to be here, and I appreciate the invitation and also the timeliness of the topic. I have just a few very short slides because there's a lot of information that I want to get through. So let's jump to the next slide, please. One of the first questions that I get anytime I go anywhere is, what about unemployment insurance? How much was it? Is it? What's going on with it? And why should we care about it? I think one of the most important things, I mean, you talked about March 11th as the last chamber meeting. Things happened pretty quickly. And when businesses were responding to the pandemic and closed and employees were struggling as businesses were, there were some programs that were specifically targeted to support businesses during the pandemic. But the primary lifeline for the workers that served as an economic stabilizer was unemployment insurance. And roughly $2.4 billion in unemployment insurance was put back out into the communities to help people pay their rent, put food on the table, and also support those local businesses. And of that $2.4 billion, about 1.8 were federal funds. As everyone in this room knows, unemployment insurance is paid for through employer taxes, and the governor recognized that businesses were feeling the pinch during the pandemic as well, and had the opportunity to use other federal funds, the CARES Act money, to put $294 million to shore up that unemployment insurance trust fund. And because of that investment, employer tax increases were minimized for 2021. Without that infusion, the unemployment insurance taxes would have probably doubled in 2021. So there was a minimal increase, but for the most part, taxes stayed fairly low. And now with the Maine recovery plan that I think everyone is familiar with, there will be an additional $80 million going into that trust fund. Trust fund solvency is incredibly important, not just to the individuals and to the businesses, but also it's one of the things that's looked at for the bond rating for the state. So having a solvent trust fund, which we do, is important for a number of reasons. And I want to just jump into the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan kind of quickly, if we could go to the next slide, because the intent is to really have a dialogue. So I will try to go through this as rapidly as possible, but I wanted you to have kind of some quick numbers. The Jobs and Recovery Plan, this is federal money that we're receiving, but the planning for this was really informed by many of you in the room. The Department of Economic and Community Development and others at the Governor's Office of Innovation and Policy met with business leaders pre-pandemic to come up with an economic development strategy for the state, and then during the pandemic to listen to what is it that's going on for you, for your businesses, what are you seeing, and what kinds of long-term investments do we need to be making as a state. When the American Recovery Act was passed, suddenly the resources were there to actually implement many of the strategies that had been discussed during the pandemic. And so the way the money is being invested is for immediate economic recovery. About $260 million will go to that, and of that, the $80 million I already talked about for the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Then investments in long-term growth, and workforce is key in this. And there are different strategies under each of these initiatives. And then in infrastructure and revitalization, and that's where the housing piece is included. So I just wanted to give you kind of a top-line overview of what the buckets of investments are. Next slide. And I want to dig into a little bit about the workforce pieces. One of the things that we did during the pandemic was to try to understand what's going on in people's lives. What is it that they're experiencing, and how do we make sure that any investments we're making are targeted? So we sent out a survey earlier in the summer to roughly 50,000 workers. I think it was about 44,000 people who had either been on unemployment in the past and had gone back to work, or who were people who were self-employed. And we got back about 2,500 responses, which was pretty significant. And these were the key barriers that we were seeing, was that there were, people were having a hard time finding work that matched their experiences in areas that were near them. There was a continuing concern about the virus. I think that one of the things that has been very different about this particular economic downturn than others in the past is because it's so closely tied to the virus. And that's the other reason that people have been stressing safety, health, vaccinations, because the quicker we can control the virus, and we've seen that, is that when people are feeling optimistic, they're feeling like they're healthy, the economy picks up. And when people are uncomfortable about that, you see folks start drawing back a little bit. So getting on top of the virus is key. There was lots of conversation about quality of jobs, and that means very different things to different people. There's no simple, oh, quality means better pay. It can mean work-life balance. It can mean, can I work remotely? It can mean, is there opportunity for me to grow with this company? And then I'm sure all of you are also aware of what are the supports that people need. We talked about housing, childcare, transportation. One of the things that popped up for me as part of this survey that I hadn't heard before was that we are also starting to hear from older workers. And Maine is one of the oldest states in the country. And if we are going to be successful and meet the needs of that we have for a talented workforce, we need to make sure that we're welcoming to older workers as well. So next slide, please. This is how we're approaching the workforce strategy at the Department of Labor and our colleagues across state government. On the far right-hand side, you will see the three primary goals, which are increase the size of Maine's talent pool by 75,000 people by 2030, increase the percentage of people with a credential of value from 44% to 60% by 2025, and then increase wages by 10% by 2030. Now, these top-line goals were all goals that came out of the Economic Development Plan, and they're being carried forward in each of the buckets of work that are taking place across implementation of the ARPA plan, the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan. So I won't go into each of these, but our focus, and I'm looking for some information from you, is to make sure that we're working on this not only comprehensively, but in partnership. Because if we have learned nothing else from this pandemic, we have learned that we all need to be working on this together in order to be successful. And we are committed to doing that. It is going to take all of us to address the challenges that we have in front of us. And it also, I have every confidence that we will be successful, and that's why I'm thrilled to be here today with my colleague, Matt, so that we can dig into some of these challenges in a little bit greater depth. And I think there's a final slide that has some information about how to access the recovery plan and also how to tap into services that we have at the Department of Labor specifically for businesses. There's a targeted email for that help, which is mainatwork.dol@maine.gov, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Laura. Matt, would you like to stand, dance around the stage, come up to the podium?
Good morning. I'm Matt Lewis. Quincy, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Nice to be with your team. And I'm the president of Hospitality Maine. Commissioner, great to be with you, and Brit, thank you. Hospitality is going to largely be what I'm talking about today because I've been in hospitality since I was in college, with airlines and with hotels and with destination management offices, and now with this position with Hospitality Maine. And I could not be more proud of the hospitality industry. And we see some articles today that have come out this summer that have sort of chided the hospitality industry, but I could not imagine a career that has brought the travel opportunity and the experience with working with amazing people. A lot of my personal and professional friends have had long and distinguished careers in hospitality, in hotels and in restaurants and in airlines. And it's not just a career field for executive and managerial level people. It is also, in my experience, for people that choose to have more of an hourly wage. They want to be home with their families in the evening. And I worked for hotels, Nico Hotels, and some of the housekeeper staff and some of the hourly staff had been in the employ of the hotels for over 20 years. And they were able to save money, and they were able to have paid vacations, and they were able to have very enjoyable lifestyles and benefits. So I'm very proud to be the president of Hospitality Maine. Members of my team, some of the members of my team have long histories in hospitality themselves, but all of us are very high on hospitality as a career. And if anyone ever has questions on that, you're welcome to reach out to me or my team to talk about that. So where are we now with hospitality? Everyone the last year and a half has gone through their own challenges. I think it's fair to say the hospitality industry has borne the brunt of some very difficult times. It's an industry that's very much in flux. We likely will have one of the busiest summers in Maine for tourism, but the employees of those hotels and restaurants have been worked to the brim. They are tired, and they're in some cases the hourlies are making good money because they've had overtime, but it's not a sustainable model year after year. We will continue to lose more employees unless the conditions can change. So as the commissioner mentioned, it's teams working together, all hands on deck. I see President Daigle here, the community colleges, the government, the state, hospitality, the chambers, all working together. We have distinct challenges with housing, people who avidly want to move to Maine, that come to Maine, and then a month later go to their bosses and say, I cannot find suitable housing, I have to move back. And unfortunately, that is not a singular issue. That's happening quite frequently. So I look forward to the conversation, and thank you again, Quincy, for the invitation.
Well, thank you so much, Matt and Commissioner Fortman. There's so much to unpack here, and even in our breakfast this morning, I wanted to ask, starting at the most simple level, like, well, where did everyone go? We were here 18 months ago and things were relatively normal, and you could go to a restaurant and you could actually get in and be served and they would be open. And now the world feels so different. And it sounds like many people want to latch on to a simple answer. Well, they're being paid to stay at home. the unemployment insurance, that's a problem. And the more you talk and the more you look into it, it sounds like there are just so many issues. So you've each touched on some of them, but maybe, Commissioner, you can talk just a little bit more about all the interplay of these things, and what are we learning from the different states trying different things around the unemployment insurance, childcare, all that.
Sure. So thank you for the question. It is more complicated. I wish there was a nice, simple answer, because then we could all just focus on that and deal with it. First of all, even pre-pandemic, there were tensions within the labor market. We had a tight labor market. We are an older state. We've had more people dying than being born for a while. That the way that we have maintained our growth is by having in-migration, whether those are from other states or other countries. And also we've kept older workers in the workforce longer. So we've been kind of patching things together for a while, and I think Matt might talk about visas in a little bit. So we've had all of that. The other thing, I want to go back to the fact that it's a pandemic. So some of the things that, the supports that were typically there, like if you had a school-aged child, you were reasonably confident that, Monday through Friday between certain hours, your child would be at school, and then you could work around that. And because of the pandemic, that has inserted a level of uncertainty that has made it hard both for businesses and for parents. If their child suddenly is going to be home from school for a couple of days, can they say to their employer, well, Matt, I know I'm supposed to be working the front desk, but I have to be at home with my child. So they can't plan on that. So I think the issue of childcare has really surfaced in what we're doing. So the flexibility around employment and supports that people need have been highlighted. Around unemployment, about half of the states continued to provide unemployment benefits, and about half of the states discontinued it. And based on preliminary studies that have been done, there's really no dramatic difference in the workforce participation in those states. A year from now, we'll know more, but it's more complicated than just here's money.
So the state's focusing on training. That's one of the aspects that you mentioned. Are there specific industries you're targeting? We hear childcare, we hear nurses in healthcare, hospitality, construction was at conferences talking about we're needing more folks in the trades well before the pandemic so that we can get more housing. We've just got all these things kind of bumping into each other. What is your focus?
Yes. I think if you look at the plan that we have, there are different strategies for different sectors. One of the things that we are investing a lot of the Recovery Act monies in is apprenticeship. And because that long-term investment, apprenticeship is a great way to work with employers to develop the specific skills that they need, combine that with classroom training as well, and people have good jobs at the end of it. There also are targeted investments in healthcare, in childcare, but we don't have the luxury to just do one thing. There are investments in all of them. So the biggest challenge is making sure, as Matt has said, that we're all working together and coordinating on this so that we're leveraging all of the good work that's going on and identifying if there are gaps, and then how do we fill them.
Yeah. Matt, in your industry, it must feel like that. Like, where did everyone go? Mm-hmm. And is it a question of, is they move? Is it housing? Do they just need to be paid more? There's a narrative out there that, they're finally saying, if I'm going to work this hard, I need to be paid more. Or is it also just maybe a little bit of everything?
Yeah, I think it's important to say, and the hospitality people in the room will acknowledge this, that almost every hotel and restaurant last year had to lay people off, furlough people. Those were very difficult conversations, as you can imagine. And in some cases, some of those people have not returned to the hospitality industry. Last year, there were a number of prominent colleges, Ivy League colleges, prominent businesses that offered free online training in many different fields, new languages, and people took advantage of that. And now we're in a position where other industries are actively coming after hospitality, veteran hospitality workers, the senior living centers, which offer incredible pay, benefits, and the cannabis companies are coming after hospitality workers. And then, I think the pandemic sort of put all of us in a position where we kind of took stock of where we were in our careers and what made us tick and what we really wanted to do in our careers. So I think it brought some new people to hospitality, but also took some people out of the picture.
Yeah, it seems like going through all this, a lot of our world just got thrown up in the air and now is sort of being resettled geographically. A lot of people have moved, relocated, they could work from home, so they went somewhere else. A lot of them have come to Maine, which has really stressed our housing market, has stressed our rental market. But it sounds like there's also just shifting within industries. So not just geographical, but reevaluate your life and what you want to be doing and maybe do something else. Interesting. So this is going to be settling out for a while.
Definitely.
And part of the role we can play is helping push and pull in the right directions as we need folks to still build housing and to do the things that we need to function as a society. Maine has, a fairly decent population of folks of color and historically marginalized communities. Is there some efforts at the state to focus on that? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I had said, and I think the Portland Chamber has really been a leader in recognizing the importance of diversity and that we're all better when we are more inclusive. And so there is funding in the ARPA plan, in the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, specifically around diversity, and in ways that we can help employers. And we're looking at diversity broadly, of not just around people of color and immigrants, also looking at people with disabilities. And what we've seen is that many times employers are willing to be more inclusive, but aren't sure of what are the first steps that I take? How do I do this? How do I make sure that I'm acting in an appropriate way, and do I have the supports that I need? So one of the things that we are looking at is what kinds of toolkits and resources would be most useful for employers. And as you had mentioned, the Department of Labor also has the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation Services in it. So our expertise is helping people with disabilities engage in the workforce and find meaningful employment. And we've done a lot of work in that area with employers, and most recently, we have a new partnership with Sodexo that and can really help employers look at the jobs that they have and then figure out ways that we can give employers the supports that they need so that they can be successful and that the people that they hire are successful. And one of the things I didn't mention about the survey that we did, we also translated that survey into 5 languages. As well, and so received some information back from folks who when English was not their primary language, and I think those are the kinds of things that we really need to be paying attention to people and what their experiences are and what is it that they need, and how can we be more accommodating and welcoming.
So it sounds like there's a number of populations that we can focus on. You'd also mentioned veterans, you'd mentioned older workers who may be facing some amount of discrimination, and so as a community to be a little more open to employment opportunities and to who our workers can be.
And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing too. I mean, even us, and you and I had talked about this ahead of time, that the Maine Department of Labor is also an employer. So we're also seeing those challenges. And so we've had to relook at how do we post our jobs? What are the actual requirements? Are we using education as a proxy for certain competencies? How are we wording our recruitment efforts? And can we be doing things like on having, 2 part-time people instead of 1 full-time person? I think all of those things are things that, as employers, all employers are really looking at.
Matt, this is Maine. This is vacation land. We live on our summers in so many ways, and certainly the hospitality industry does. The visa program has been so critical to the functioning of our summers here in Maine. Can you talk about the impact of not having that this year and looking to the future, and what can we do?
I would almost recommend to my members will not like hearing this, but as of now, to almost plan for next year being like this year. We will have visas, but it's likely that possible that we will not have more than we have this year. Hopefully we will, but it's largely dependent on the travel restrictions that are in place for some of the countries where we typically get visas: Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, some Asian countries. So as long as those restrictions remain in place, it will be difficult to see a large surplus of visas. The other part of the equation, and I know Quincy has a subject on this next month for exit issues, is the housing. Quite frankly, if we did get that increase in visas, where would we house these people? We have people in Bar Harbor that are so stretched for housing, and other parts of the states where owners of businesses have literally had to buy buildings to house their staff. That's a very difficult position to be in and likely to continue. So I hope there'll be a change in visas. Our government affairs director, Greg Dougal, who's so fantastic, is working feverishly to try to get that changed, and to get more visas in place, as other people are in the state. But it's possible it will look very similar next year, and unfortunately we may be having very similar conversations next year.
It's so challenging, and it has been interesting to see the need from employers. My day job is selling housing and apartment buildings, and we have had some of our buyers recently be employers needing housing. And that was not part of the dynamic of the housing industry. Most folks do not want to go into the housing business, but they can't function this summer if they don't have a place to put their staff. So that's absolutely a component. I know the governor, I think, has just convened a task force on housing in the state, and I don't recall how much is affordable housing and how much is housing generally. But I think as a community, thanks for the plug. This is going to be our topic next month to talk more about housing, but it's all related. Again, it's a complicated issue.
Can I just add one other thing? President Daigle and I and some people in the community have been working on finding housing for recruits that are coming to Maine. If you are a hotel or a lodging facility or a real estate company and you feel like you will have apartment availability or lodging availability for first quarter of next year, where the rentals might be more plentiful, please reach out to me and let me know so we can look into that. It is that dire of a situation that housing is a challenge here. Yeah. And that's a long-term effort that many people will have to be a part of.
I think we're at about a time that if we want to take some questions from folks in the room, would love to do that. I've got at least one mic here.
It's like the old days where Susan gets things started.
Let's say it, a familiar face coming up to kick it off.
Good morning. My name is Susan Morris. Laura, my question for you is, could you speak to us a little bit more about your learnings about the older workforce members and what makes them different irrelevant to the pandemic? You mentioned you had some learnings from this survey. I'm going to keep going. Matt, my question for you is, at what table is a conversation taking place about truly establishing a career path and profession for hospitality in the state of Maine to differentiate us? Who's involved from government, higher education, and private sector? And Brit, I would hate to leave you out on this. I am curious from yourself, Laura as well, and others in the room. It seems we have an opportunity to We have lots of anecdotes about who has come to Maine in the last couple of years. Yes, the pandemic accelerated that, but it's going on. So what are the ways in which we can truly be doing data tracking? Is it taxation? Is it residency? Is it surveys on Concord and Down Easter of who are these people coming and going? And also, how are we going to learn about what would encourage people to move here, stay here? How are we going to get everyone through the winter? How are we going to onboard them? I just feel there's a real opportunity to have data gathered and be able to analyze it, which brings me to my last point. Not only could we do away with from away, I'm going to suggest that we stop using the term vacation land. I feel that that plays down what we in Maine offer, which is an incredible quality of life, yes, but without having to sacrifice or sabotage your economic opportunity here. And we are a state in which it is a lovely experience with opportunity on a year-round basis. Thank you.
So you're all off the hook. There are no more questions. We'll be fielding those for the next 20 minutes. Great point about vacation land. I definitely use it only to very specifically talk about the summer visa issue because it's a great point. Thank you so much, Susan. Commissioner, would you like to take the first question, which I think I didn't write it down, but I think I've got it. About older workers and the value that they can bring.
Sure. So thanks for the question, and I don't think that we have any definitive answers yet. But again, I'll go back to the pandemic. Early on in the pandemic, what we were hearing was that older workers were at higher risk. So that really reinforced the fact, and that's why they were vaccinated first. But it was for health reasons that people left the workforce. And as people became vaccinated and were trying to re-enter the workforce, that's when people started saying, maybe that the place that I was in before, there's not a fit for me. And also some workers were looking at, are there ways to work remotely? And would that be a possibility? So as Matt had pointed out, the pandemic kind of forced everyone to step back and do some reassessment. And that has made many people rethink how they want to work, where they want to work, and how much they want to work. And I think that's true for older workers as well, where we don't have we haven't yet had an in-depth workshop specifically on this issue, but that's on our list of things to do. I think for us at this point, it's just raising the fact that we're starting to hear from older workers that they're having challenges when they're trying to find work. We do a workshop once a month that is moving to like once a week on for workers age 55 and older, how to interview, how to talk about your skills in different ways. But I wanted to put that out here as we're hearing it, and at a time when people are saying, hey, I need workers, I think we need to really be listening and checking our own, how we're interviewing with people and reaching out to people and not writing people off.
Thank you. And Matt, let me translate the question just a little bit in terms of the labor shortage. Do you perceive a lack of sort of a career path in the hospitality industry? And if so, is that contributing to the challenges today, that they went off and got training to go on a different path because maybe they didn't see a path in hospitality? Is that a fair point?
Yeah, I think possibly, but I think there are career opportunities and career paths in hospitality. But again, I think there is a certain segment of the hospitality that are hourly employees that prefer that. So their goal is not to get promoted. They like the hourly lifestyle and to be home with their families at night. But there are definitely career opportunities. There some wonderful college opportunities in Maine for hospitality and tourism with wonderful placement opportunities. And I would just talk about Susan's question about, I think there are a lot of people in the state that are working on trying to find solutions to housing and childcare and transportation. But right now, it seems like it's very regional. There are people chatting in Bar Harbor, and there's people chatting in Portland, and there's people down in southern Maine chatting, so it would be nice to get everyone together and a group together to talk about it. But I will say that Commissioner Johnson and Kate Foy did have some listening sessions recently to talk about where some of the ARPA funding would go, and the housing was a part of that conversation. So I was pleased to hear about that.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on the career pathways, there's also funding in the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan for career pathways and really identifying them, because that's one of the things that we hear particularly from like young people in our rural communities is they may not see a path forward for themselves, and so we'll be doing more work to make those career pathways explicit and have more avenues for people to access that information. Because that's the other thing. There's an awful lot of good work going on out there, but not everybody knows how to access that information. So,
is there any tracking of data regarding people coming to Maine, what job segments they're coming here for, the housing? You know, we all have our anecdotes. I certainly have met and interviewed people and hired people for other organizations I'm involved with who just moved to Portland. They were living in Manhattan, but they're working from home, and why not work from home in Portland, Maine, rather than Manhattan? So we've certainly seen that anecdotally. Is there any way that we can start to get a handle on who's here and who's not here and where they're going?
So again, I'd refer to my colleague over at DECD, and there is a whole data component of the Jobs and Recovery Plan where we're looking at that. I mean, at the Department of Labor, we stay very focused on employment, on what jobs are growing, or those kinds of changes. But the state economist, Amanda Rector, also keeps track of demographic information, and so we're trying to do a better job taking all of the information that's there and trying to put it together in a more coherent way.
Got another question coming to the microphone.
Good morning. I'm Peter Plum, a local lawyer, and I've lived on Park Street now for 50 years, a block away. Many of our clients are restaurants and other businesses in the hospitality area generally, and of course, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said already, that they're all screaming. Many had to work on very shortened hours this summer, close on certain days, couldn't get the staff. One of the hottest topics in Portland has been the question of the minimum wage and what should the minimum wage be. And I'm wondering, particularly for Matt and maybe the commissioner, has there been any thought given or any evidence that raising the minimum wage to say $15 an hour or whatever it might be would impact the current shortage of people working in those restaurant jobs? Thank you.
Anyone want to jump into that?
It's a good question, Peter. Prior, when I first started with Hospitality Maine, when the minimum wage conversation was happening, our organization came out opposed to the increase, largely because we have members in the northern part of from Bangor North that simply could not afford the statewide minimum wage. Certainly internally, we did want to see some sort of increase, but we felt like the number that was put out was a little bit high. In some cases, Peter, it's a moot point right now because many of our members are paying far more than that conversation was, months ago. So might it be playing some part? Yes, but probably other factors are at play as well, much more. deeply.
I mean, I'm on the assumption, as I see all these help wanted signs from truck drivers to hospitality to everywhere, that the employers can make their own decision about what they need to do to attract workers. I mean, it seems like if there's ever a time we don't need minimum wage, my terrible understanding of economics, this might be the time we don't need to force employers to do it, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they're missing something.
Our Hospitality Maine is a statewide Maine organization. Restaurants and hotels in Millinocket could not afford that minimum wage that we were discussing. Possibly hotels and restaurants in Portland could have. So we have to be reflective of our entire membership. At the same point, we would certainly, I think, have wanted to see some sort of minimum wage increase, but now, again, it's yes, you're correct. Companies can make that own decision, and they are, to compete against people that are coming for those workers.
Yep. Commissioner?
So I think the Portland minimum wage issue was different than the state minimum wage issue. You know, there was a statewide referendum around minimum wage, and that's the one that we enforce.
Anyone else from the audience? This is such a rich topic.
We have time for one more question.
All right. When two jumped up and one got up.
I was just going to ask, it seems to me, being in the hospitality business, a big barrier to making it seem like a career, especially here in Maine, is seasonality. And whether you're looking to grow a career or you're looking for those hourly jobs that you mentioned, there's just a massive contraction in jobs that comes in the winter. And then summer comes, and at least this summer, probably next summer, we can't even support the demand that's there. So any clever ideas that people are bouncing around to just increase the vitality of the state in the winter time, whether that means bringing more tourists in the winter or it means getting people out of the house in the winter, just to keep more of these, not just hospitality, but every knock-on industry from there, keep them employing more people throughout the winter?
I wish I had a better answer here for you, but I suspect well, let's step back a second. I understand that the winter sports community in Maine did not have a successful winter as other New England states did last year. Obviously, I think we will see an effort for that to be better this year with Dirk and his team and other members of the tourism community. A lot of that was the weather. A lot of that was weather, you know, with the skiing. The snow didn't come until later or right around Christmas time, and then it stopped for a while. But I think a part of Maine's business model is that some hotels and restaurants close in the winter and in spring. And then they open at some point for summer in the fall. I unfortunately think we will see more of that, the closures. There will certainly be members that are open, hotels and restaurants, and will probably do pretty well. We have members that are expecting to be busy into next year, the ones that are staying open. So I wish I had an answer that would be better for you, but I think that right now with the climate, everyone is scratching and clawing so hard to stay afloat, and they're playing catch up from last year, that they're doing everything they can to stay solvent.
I think that's a great question, though, about the seasonality of the work and how that feeds into decision making. And you were talking earlier about some people saying, you know, I need something else. I need more stability in my life. I think because this is such a vital industry in our state, that is something that we are concerned about and trying to address. I mean, years ago, one of the things that was tried, but you know, Matt talked about the winter season. It was like there was like, oh, so is there some way that during the summer months you've got people working in hospitality along like the coast, and in the winter we provide opportunities up on the ski slopes? Are they the same people? Are they the same same industries. So there are conversations, but there hasn't been a kind of a clear path forward on that. I mean, the other thing that we can look at, you also talked about the transferable skills. Are there, that there are solid customer service skills that you learn in the hospitality industry? Are there places that those skills could be put to work in another seasonal industry? And I think Maine people have been doing that for a long time, kind of packaging their jobs together over the seasons.
I think it's just a fact that people, Mainers aside, don't like the cold as much as they like the warmth. I think the populations of states around our country reflect that. So we're always going to have a challenge. Maybe climate change is on our side there. Well, I want to wrap up and say a sincere thank you to Commissioner Fortman and Matt Lewis. Thank you. This has been a great conversation. It's timely, and we're just going to all keep working on it together. So thank you so much for being here. As we conclude today's program, you can view a complete list of the Chamber's upcoming events at the Chamber's website. We also want to encourage everyone to subscribe to the Chamber's newsletter and follow the Chamber across all the social media platforms. We look forward to seeing you in the fall, hopefully in person, as we continue our Exit Issue series. We're going to be talking about housing next month and getting insights from the development community, housing, shelter advocates, and other experts on land use and zoning. So thank you again for being here in person. Thank you for watching if you're at home or at your office, and we look forward to seeing you next month.